A Chinese ghost-hunting influencer who built her following by challenging spirits and mocking superstition has died. Zhang Xiaorou gained around 1.3 million followers by exploring abandoned places and attempting to disprove supernatural beliefs. In one of her most controversial stunts, she deliberately destroyed a statue of Guan Yin, the Buddhist goddess of mercy, to see whether she would be cursed. She even joked about it afterward, telling viewers to subscribe to see how long I live. Roughly a year later, the 24-year-old was critically injured in a car crash, suffering severe brain injuries and organ damage. She remained in a coma for nearly a month before dying in August of 2026. After her death, the old footage and her eerie comments resurfaced, with viewers claiming the curse had finally caught up with her. In 2021, 5-year-old Oakley Carlson disappeared from her Washington home, but incredibly, her parents never reported her missing. Months later, during a sleepover, Oakley's 6-year-old sister told her school principal's daughter, "Oakley is no more, and there is no Oakley." Alarmed by what she heard, the principal immediately contacted authorities. During a later interview, Oakley's sister reportedly said her mother had forbidden her from talking about Oakley and claimed she had gone into the woods and been eaten by wolves. Investigators discovered no one outside her parents had confirmed seeing Oakley for months. Her siblings also alleged she'd been beaten, starved, and locked beneath the stairs. Oakley has never been found, and neither parent has been charged in her disappearance. In November of 2022, 7-year-old Athena Strand was struck by a FedEx delivery van while playing in her Texas driveway, but she survived the impact with only minor injuries. But instead of calling for help, the driver, 31-year-old Tanner Lynn Horner, panicked after Athena said she was going to tell her father, took her inside his van, and murdered her. Court documents state he first tried to break her neck, and when that failed, strangled her with his bare hands while she was still alive. He then drove around for hours and dumped her body near the Trinity River, returning to work as if nothing had happened. Athena's disappearance sparked a massive search, and her body was found 2 days later after Horner confessed and led police to the location. He was charged with capital murder and kidnapping, with prosecutors seeking the harshest possible sentence. This is why you should never dump your pet goldfish in the wild. A goldfish weighing 30 kilograms, about 67 pounds, was pulled from a lake in France after growing to an enormous size. Goldfish can reproduce rapidly, creating entire populations of invasive fish that overwhelm local ecosystems. Some lakes have reported thousands of them multiplying beneath the surface, unseen until the damage is already done. Without natural predators and with endless food, they grow to ridiculous sizes, churn up lake beds, rip out vegetation, cloud the water, and slowly suffocate native wildlife. In 2002, Washington State mother Lydia Fairchild nearly lost custody of her own children after DNA tests appeared to prove she wasn't biologically related to them. She had applied for public assistance, and routine genetic testing showed her DNA did not match the children she had given birth to, raising suspicions of fraud. After multiple failed maternity tests, doctors discovered she was an extremely rare human chimera, meaning she had absorbed her twin in the womb and carried 2 distinct sets of DNA in her body. Her reproductive organs contained different genetic material than the rest of her tissues, which is why standard DNA testing falsely suggested she wasn't their mother. You may have this extremely rare eye condition without even realizing it. Visual snow is a neurological condition where a constant layer of flickering static fills a person's entire field of vision, often described like television noise that never turns off. For years, it was thought to be extremely rare, partly because many sufferers never reported it, believing their vision was normal. Only recently has it been more widely recognized as visual snow syndrome, with researchers linking it to abnormal activity in the brain's visual processing areas rather than problems with the eyeballs themselves. There's currently no known cure, though some treatments may help reduce symptoms for certain patients. Some people live with the condition for decades before realizing that what they see is not how most people experience the world. Xenoturbella is a simple deep-sea organism that has no brain, no eyes, and no clearly defined organ, consisting mostly of a soft, ciliated body with a single opening used for both feeding and waste. First discovered in the 1900s, it puzzled scientists for decades because its anatomy is so minimal that researchers struggled to classify it, with debates still continuing over where it fits on the evolutionary tree. It survives by ingesting tiny organic material on the ocean floor, and for many researchers it appears to exist for no clear reason. Here's a photo of Magda Goebbels with her 6 children, taken sometime before all 6 would be murdered by their own parents as Nazi Germany collapsed. Their father, Joseph Goebbels, wasn't just a high-ranking Nazi, but the architect of the regime's propaganda machine, a man responsible for saturating Germany with anti-Semitic hatred, glorifying mass murder, justifying the Holocaust, and convincing millions that extermination and total war were moral duties. He publicly called for the annihilation of Jews, celebrated civilian deaths, and demanded Germans to fight to extinguish extinction rather than surrender, even as cities burned and children starved. As Soviet forces closed in on Berlin in May of 1945, Goebbels remained fanatically loyal to Hitler, retreating with his family into the Führer bunker. There, Magda decided that her children could not live in a world without Nazism, poisoning each of them with cyanide as they... In December of 2001, 27-year-old Christian Longo murdered his entire family in Oregon as his web of lies, debt, and financial fraud began to unravel. He first strangled his wife, Mary Jane Longo, then turned on their children in the most sadistic way imaginable. 4-year-old Zachary and 3-year-old Sadie were bound to rocks and carried to Yaquina Bay, where Longo threw them into the freezing water while they were still alive, leaving them to drown in the dark. Their youngest child, 2-year-old Madison, was drowned alone in the family bathtub. Afterward, Longo abandoned the bodies, fled the country, and lived under a false identity in Mexico for weeks while his children lay undiscovered. At trial, he attempted to shift blame by falsely claiming Mary Jane had killed the children first, a story dismantled by forensic evidence and rejected by the jury. Longo was convicted and sentenced to death in 2003, and later resentenced to life without parole in 2011, where he remains imprisoned. In 2018, a man from Rhode Island returned from his vacation in Costa Rica with severe migraines and facial paralysis, initially thought to be a brain tumor. But instead, doctors discovered a rare black mold growing inside his brain, forming dangerous abscesses. The fungus, found in soil, is known for attacking the brain and carries a mortality rate of around 70%, with early cases historically being almost always fatal. Since 1911, only about 120 cases have ever been recorded worldwide. The infection likely entered his body during the trip and slowly spread to his brain, causing several strokes and neurological damage. Because of its location deep in the brain, the mold couldn't be fully removed, but after extensive treatment, the man miraculously managed to survive. In April of 2011, French aristocrat Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès killed his wife, 4 children, and the family's 2 dogs inside their home in Nantes using a .22 caliber rifle while they slept. Investigators later found the victims wrapped in plastic and buried beneath the terrace, alongside religious items and letters suggesting he had carefully planned the murders before withdrawing money, abandoning his car in southern France, and vanishing without a confirmed trace. Despite an international manhunt, sightings, and several false leads over the years, he's never been located, leaving the case one of France's most disturbing unsolved family murder mysteries, with authorities still uncertain whether he escaped abroad, lives under a false identity, or died shortly after disappearing. The Scourged Back is an 1863 photograph of an escaped enslaved man named Peter, also known as Gordon, taken after he reached a Union Army camp during the American Civil War. The image shows his back covered in thick keloid scars caused by repeated brutal whippings while enslaved on a Louisiana plantation. The scars were the result of agonizing abuse severe enough to permanently disfigure his skin. When the photograph was published and widely circulated in northern newspapers, it provided undeniable visual proof of the physical cruelty of slavery and became one of the most powerful abolitionist images of the 19th century. Brazilian girl Helena Valera was kidnapped as a child in the 1930s by members of the Yanomami, an isolated indigenous group living deep in the Amazon rainforest. She spent more than 20 years living among them, where she endured repeated violence, forced marriages, sexual abuse, and the killing of her children during tribal conflicts. After escaping back to Western society in 1956, she struggled to reintegrate and was treated as an outsider, never fully belonging to either world. Haunted by trauma, yet emotionally tied to the only life she truly knew, Valero eventually chose to return to live with indigenous tribes in the Amazon, remaining there until her death in 2003, a rare and unsettling case of someone voluntarily returning to a society that once abducted them. This is the sunburst appearance of osteosarcoma, the most common form of bone cancer. The pattern forms when the tumor grows so aggressively that it forces new bone to shoot outward in sharp radiating spikes. It's most often seen in teenagers and young adults, typically in long bones like the femur near the knee. As it advances, the cancer can hollow out and weaken the bone from the inside, leading to intense pain, swelling, and sometimes sudden fractures under normal pressure. Even with treatment, it can quickly spread to the lungs, making it a particularly fast-moving and devastating disease. In 1974 in Memphis, R&B singer Al Green was attacked by his girlfriend Mary Woodson after he refused to marry her. As he was getting ready for bed, she poured a pot of boiling grits all over him, leaving him with severe second-degree burns across his torso. He reportedly ran through the house screaming in pain before collapsing. Green survived but required extensive recovery, and the incident became one of the most disturbing and defining moments of his life. Jerry, better known online as Gazelle Beauty, was born with megalocornea, an extremely rare genetic disorder that causes the corneas to grow far larger than usual. The condition gave Jerry unusually large eyes from birth, leading many childhood photos to go viral because of their unsettling appearance. While often mistaken for a cosmetic trait, megalocornea is a lifelong medical condition that can be associated with vision problems, light sensitivity, and an increased risk of serious eye complications later on in life. The disorder is so rare that very few doctors will ever encounter a patient with it during their entire careers. In 2024, 26-year-old American YouTuber Elliot Eastman repeatedly told his audience he feared armed men would come for him while living in a conflict-prone region of the Philippines. After marrying a local woman and openly documenting his life, income, and whereabouts online, Eastman randomly ended one of his live streams without saying goodbye. Roughly 2 hours later, armed men reportedly arrived at his home, shot him, and abducted him by boat. Despite extensive searches, his body was never recovered, leaving his ultimate fate officially unsolved but widely presumed fatal. In 2004, 3-year-old Riley Fox was taken from her home while her mother was away at a breast cancer fundraiser. Her father, Kevin Fox, had spent the day with Riley and her 6-year-old brother making posters for their mom. That night, after bringing the children home from their grandmother's house, Kevin let them sleep on the couch because their bed sheets were still in the dryer. When Riley was discovered missing the next morning, Kevin initially believed she had wandered to a neighbor's house and searched the area with his son. But later that day, Riley's body was found several miles away near a park, confirming she'd been raped and killed. Investigators quickly fixated on Kevin, repeatedly questioning his young son and isolating Riley's mother while questioning Kevin for roughly 14 hours. He was shown horrific photos of his daughter's murder and eventually coerced into giving a false confession. DNA evidence later proved his innocence and he was released, but the ordeal had already taken its toll on Kevin's mental health. 6 years later, a woman tipped off the FBI about her former boyfriend, already imprisoned for crimes against a child, who had referenced Riley's case. His DNA eventually matched and he confessed, admitting he had entered the Fox home and killed Riley at a nearby park. Kevin Fox was fully exonerated and won a $9 million lawsuit against the state. The man responsible is now serving life in prison, and according to his confession, Riley's last words were, "I want my daddy." This may be the most disturbing Valentine's Day gift of all time. South African trophy hunter Marilise van der Merwe drew backlash after killing a 17-year-old bull giraffe during a Valentine's Day hunt her husband reportedly paid for. After shooting the animal, she cut out its heart and presented it to her husband as a Valentine's Day gift, later posting photos with it online. The images quickly went viral and sparked criticism worldwide, but she defended the hunt by saying regulated trophy hunts generate permit fees that go toward wildlife management, anti-poaching efforts, and local land conservation, and that older, non-breeding animals are often selected to reduce pressure on habitats. In 2020, a Dollar General employee with diabetes was fired after drinking a $2 orange juice at the register when she began feeling symptoms of diabetic shock. The company said she violated policy by consuming merchandise before paying for it, labeling the act as grazing, even though she later paid for the drink. The dispute escalated into a lawsuit, and a jury ultimately awarded her $277,000 in damages, turning the incident into a widely discussed example of strict workplace policy clashing with a medical emergency. Seattle artist Sunday Nobody spent $25,000 creating a bronze statue, combining the ancient Greek Discobolus with the face of handsome Squidward. He consulted archaeologists to ensure it could withstand long-term underwater conditions, then deliberately sank it about 9 meters deep in the Mediterranean Sea, so it could potentially be discovered in the future as a convincing artifact. This executioner sword from the late 17th century Germany was engraved with the words, "When I raise this sword, so I wish that this poor sinner will receive eternal life." The Creel Mound in what is now West Virginia, built around 250 BC by the Adena culture, contained a central burial surrounded by multiple skeletons arranged in a circle, with their feet pointed toward the body in the middle. Archaeologists believe the positioning suggests a ritual burial, possibly involving individuals placed around a high-status figure, though the exact circumstances remain unclear. The Celtic Carnix was an ancient war horn used by Celtic tribes between 300 BC and 200 AD. It was a long, vertical bronze instrument, often shaped with an animal head at the top, designed to project intimidating sounds across the battlefield. Moments before combat, its eerie, haunting blasts would echo through the air, one of the last sounds Roman soldiers heard before facing their enemies. During the recent earthquakes in Venezuela, security cameras captured a terrifying race against time. Several people can be seen sprinting down the final flights of stairs as the building starts shaking violently. Seconds later, the entire structure starts collapsing behind them, reducing it to a massive pile of rubble as they escaped by mere moments. The powerful earthquakes caused widespread devastation across the country, destroying thousands of buildings and leaving more than 1,000 people dead, with many more displaced or injured. This was the moment a man was in serious danger of becoming a polar bear's next meal. After spotting the massive predator charging toward him, he sprinted for his snowmobile as the bear rapidly closed the distance. Just as he managed to start the engine, the roar of the snowmobile made the bear hesitate for just a split second. That brief pause gave him just enough time to speed away to safety. Polar bears are the only bears known to actively stalk and hunt humans as prey, making encounters like this among the most dangerous in the animal kingdom. As a child, Michael's father Joseph would constantly torment him about his appearance, often calling him Fat Nose. Michael went on to have 4 rhinoplasties and was insecure about his appearance for his entire life. According to his former doctor, Conrad Murray, Michael's father chemically castrated him when he was a young boy. He reportedly did this so that Michael would maintain his high-pitched singing voice into adulthood. On one occasion in the 1960s, Joe wanted to teach his kids a lesson about leaving the windows open at night. So when little Michael was asleep, his father climbed through the window wearing a mask and screamed at him. From that point on, Michael would have recurring nightmares about being kidnapped from his bedroom. But the abuse didn't stop there. Joe would also hold onto a belt while the Jackson 5 rehearsed, ready to strike his children if one of them made a mistake. Michael was reportedly so terrified of his father that he would sometimes throw up just from merely being in his presence. He once said he felt the safest while performing on stage since his father wouldn't be able to beat him in front of a crowd. From a very young age, Michael described being forced into long, exhausting rehearsals for hours at a time, completely missing out on a normal childhood. He said watching other kids play from the window while he rehearsed was one of the memories that stayed with him the most. Tiamat Legion Medusa once lived a completely different life. Formerly known as Richard Hernandez, he climbed the corporate ladder and became vice president of a major bank in Texas. But after being diagnosed with HIV in the 1990s, he said he began completely reevaluating his life and identity. Over the years, he underwent dozens of extreme body modifications to resemble a mythical dragon, including facial tattoos, horn implants, a split tongue, reshaped ears, removed teeth, and other extensive procedures. The transformation was so dramatic that old photos of him as a clean-cut executive and father look like a completely different species. In 1959, psychologist Milton Rokeach brought 3 psychiatric patients together who all believed they were Jesus Christ. He hoped that meeting 2 other Christs would break their delusions, but each simply dismissed the others as imposters or insane. The bizarre experiment later inspired the 2017 film 3 Christs starring Richard Gere. In July of 2026, 23-year-old Japanese woman Haru Inaba was walking in Japan with a friend when 29-year-old Shinsei Taguchi plunged from a 12-story apartment building and landed directly on top of her. Taguchi, the man who fell, incredibly survived the 12-story plunge, while Inaba, the woman he landed on, died hours later from hemorrhagic shock. Investigators are still trying to determine whether Taguchi fell or jumped intentionally. Kimbo Slice rose from viral backyard street fights to become one of the most recognizable names in combat sports, turning his YouTube fame into careers in MMA, boxing, and the UFC. But just months after his final fight, he was rushed to a Florida hospital, suffering from severe abdominal pain, nausea, and shortness of breath. Doctors discovered his body was completely shutting down. He was in advanced congestive heart failure, his kidneys had failed bad enough to require dialysis, and a mass had been found on his liver. Although no official cause was announced for why his health had deteriorated so rapidly, he was placed on the waiting list for an emergency heart transplant. Just 3 days after being admitted, Kimbo died at the age of 42, leaving behind 6 children. After becoming an international superstar with her 1990 hit Nothing Compares to You, Sinead O'Connor's career became overshadowed by controversy following her infamous 1992 appearance on Saturday Night Live, where she tore up a photo of Pope John Paul II to protest child abuse within the Catholic Church. She was widely criticized at the time, and the backlash permanently damaged her career. Over the following decades, she spoke openly about living with mental illness. Sao Paulo, Brazil, 1990. A botched robbery leads to a hostage situation, resulting in a tense standoff with police. The would-be thief brandishly holds a gun against the head of his terrified captive as the scene quickly draws a crowd. The standoff continues for more than 2 hours as authorities desperately contemplate how to handle the situation. Then suddenly, local police hatch a daring plan. An undercover police sergeant holding a camera poses as a reporter, and in a split second, he seizes control of the weapon before other officers are able to rush in. The hostage was rescued completely unharmed while the suspect was taken into custody. This is why you should never wear AirPods while wandering around a train station. This Turkish woman was a split second from being clapped by a passing train if it wasn't for a rail worker pulling her away just in time. She very easily could have been pulled under the tram and suffered a serious leg injury or worse. This man was taking a casual stroll in Nepal when he was suddenly met by something shocking: a massive rhino chasing him down. While attacks like this are rare, rhinos are responsible for an estimated 2 to 3 human deaths each year, usually when people unknowingly wander too close or startle them. Known for their poor eyesight but extremely sharp hearing and smell, rhinos can charge at speeds of up to 30 miles per hour, leaving almost no time to react once they lock onto a target. The fate of the man in this video is unknown. Mako Nishimura is widely regarded as the only woman ever formally accepted as a full member of Japan's traditionally male-dominated Yakuza. After earning a reputation for such extreme violence that a Yakuza boss personally recruited her, she spent over 30 years overseeing prostitution, drug trafficking, and brutal debt collection. She eventually became known as the Mistress of Finger Cutting for carrying out the ritual amputations required of members who broke the gang's code. After leaving the Yakuza, she dedicated her life to helping former gang members escape organized crime, find jobs, reconnect with their families, and build new lives outside of the underworld. In 1989, Rudy Linares held hospital staff at gunpoint before disconnecting his 15-month-old son Samuel's life support and cradling the boy as he died. Samuel had suffered irreversible brain damage after choking on a balloon months earlier, and although doctors agreed he would never recover, Illinois law prevented them from removing the ventilator because he was not legally brain dead. Linares was initially charged with murder, but a grand jury refused to indict him, and he ultimately pleaded guilty only to unlawful use of a weapon.
So I got my katana.
It doesn't get easier to watch. Oh, that's a tough watch. That was when Twitch streamer Biscuit suffered a sudden severe injury live on stream after her katana slipped from its sheath. As the blade fell toward the floor, she instinctively tried to grab it, and it sliced into her hand, severing 2 tendons. She ended the stream almost immediately as she was taken to the emergency room.
I need to cut stream. I have to go to ER. I think I f***ed my fingers.
Hours later, the streamer posted an update from the hospital showing her arm heavily bandaged and immobilized. Tendon damage often requires surgery and long rehabilitation, with no guarantee of full strength or mobility ever returning. Juan Fernando Hermosa is considered the youngest serial killer in Ecuadorian history. Between 1991 and 1992, Hermosa murdered at least 22 people when he was just 15 years old, targeting taxi drivers and stealing their vehicles. But because he was a minor at the time of the killing, Ecuadorian law capped his sentence at 4 years regardless of the number of victims, and Hermosa was released after serving the maximum juvenile sentence. Almost immediately after his release, he was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered as an act of vigilante revenge connected to his heinous crimes. This was one of the last known photos taken of rapper XXXTentacion, moments before he was fatally shot during a robbery outside a Florida motorcycle dealership in June of 2018. Investigators determined it was not a targeted hit job, but a robbery gone wrong after suspects spotted his luxury vehicle and expensive Louis Vuitton bag. Released surveillance footage showed 2 gunmen approaching his car, demanding the bag and opening fire when he resisted. The 20-year-old artist born Jase Onfroy was shot multiple times at close range and died shortly after at a nearby hospital. In 2023, 3 men were convicted of his first-degree murder and armed robbery. Beatriz Flamini spent 500 days completely alone inside a cave nearly 230 feet underground, cut off from sunlight, clocks, and all human contact as part of an experiment on extreme isolation. She entered the cave in November of 2021 and did not emerge until April of 2023, with no communication with the outside world during that time. Scientists monitoring her remotely had found that her circadian rhythm had completely collapsed, with severe sleep disruption, memory lapses, and slowed cognition developing over time. Flamini later described moments of mental detachment and sensory distortion, and when she finally resurfaced, she genuinely believed she'd only been underground for about 160 days, illustrating how prolonged isolation can fundamentally fracture the brain's sense of time and reality. This was the moment a mermaid performer was attacked by a Chinese sturgeon during a live aquarium show. The performer, Maria Zelenina, was swimming inside a tank at Xishuangbana Primitive Forest Park when the massive fish lunged forward without warning and pulled her head into its jaws as spectators watched in horror. She fought free underwater and surfaced in visible distress with her goggles ripped off, suffering from facial bruising, swelling around her eye, and lingering pain that affected her vision, later requiring medical treatment. While there are no confirmed cases of a sturgeon killing a human, the species can grow over 10 feet long, weighs hundreds of pounds, and has powerful jaws capable of crushing bone, meaning a sustained bite or loss of air underwater could easily be fatal. Here's a clip showing the importance of being aware of your surroundings at all times. In the video, a family is unloading their car in what many commenters believe to be a South American country like Argentina. Before going inside, the woman immediately senses something is wrong when a car pulls up directly in front of her. Without hesitation, she runs inside and locks the door just seconds before the men can reach the house. With no access to the home, the men quickly grab items from the family's car, get back in their vehicle, and speed off.